Episode 1. The First Whisper Beneath the Floorboards. They told me prayers rise to heaven like smoke, but the first time I prayed inside that abandoned chapel, my words didn't rise at all. They sank. I was alone. Candles barely flickered in the damp air, their light trembling against the cracked walls. I whispered the old Latin verse I had found scribbled in the margins of a forgotten psalm, and that's when I heard it. A voice, soft, fractured, echoing from beneath the floorboards. At first I thought it was the creak of wood, the groan of a building left to rot. But then I realized the voice was repeating my prayer, word for word, syllable for syllable. Except it wasn't a voice at all. It was dozens, whispering in unison. My chest froze, my breath caught. I told myself to stop, to stand up, to leave. But the echo beneath me begged, pleaded, continue. The boards beneath my knees quivered. Dust fell through the cracks as something shifted underneath. I leaned closer, trembling, and in the faint candlelight I saw it, a pale, skeletal hand pushing up through the gap in the wood. Then another, and another. They didn't reach for me yet. They only stretched upward, as if desperate to touch the words that had fallen, each finger trembling like the strings of an unseen instrument. I bit my tongue to silence the prayer, but the hands, God help me, the hands began to tap. Tap, 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 like impatient children begging for a song to finish. And then one hand curled its finger and pointed directly at me. The whispers stopped. The silence was worse. That was the moment I understood this was no echo. The prayer had not traveled upward. It had been swallowed whole by the ground, devoured by whatever lived below. And now it was waiting for me to pray again. Episode 2. The Forbidden Psalm. I should have walked away that night, but I didn't. The chapel called me back, as though the hands beneath the floor had carved their hunger into my bones. For days, I tried to forget what I had seen. I avoided prayer, avoided silence, avoided sleep. But the memory of those fingers, thin, twitching, desperate, haunted every corner of my mind. And then I found it. The torn page. It was hidden inside the hymnal, tucked between chapters, as if someone wanted it concealed, but not destroyed. The parchment was stained with something darker than ink, something that looked too much like dried blood. Across the top, in hurried, uneven script, one line had been written: "Do not finish this prayer unless you want to be touched by the forgotten." I traced the letters with shaking fingers. My heart told me to burn it. My curiosity told me to read. Curiosity always wins. That night, I lit a single candle and returned to the chapel. The air was colder, heavier, as though the building knew I had brought its secret back. I opened the page, lips trembling, and began to recite. The first words felt harmless. A psalm, almost gentle, lulling like the rhythm of a lullaby. My voice carried into the dark rafters above and down through the cracks below. At once the floor responded. The wood beneath my knees vibrated with a pulse, a heartbeat not my own. Dust leapt, nails creaked, and through the seams, pale fingertips emerged, 5, 10, then 20, clawing upward, waiting. The deeper I read, the more frantic they became. Some clawed at the wood, splintering it. Others curled as if in prayer, imitating me. And then one hand, larger than the rest, pressed flat against the floor from beneath, the boards bowing upward beneath its strength. I choked on the words. My voice faltered. That was my mistake. The hands went still. The whispers beneath the wood turned sharp, angry, like hissing through broken teeth. They didn't want silence. They wanted the prayer finished. My candle flickered, nearly dead, as I forced the last words out. My voice cracked, the syllables foreign and sour in my throat. And the moment I said the final line, a hand burst through the floor. Not ghostly, not spectral. Flesh, gray, damp and trembling, its nails black and long as knives. It didn't reach for the air. It reached for me, and I understood too late. The warning was not meant to frighten me. It was meant to protect me. Episode 3. The Hands Remembered a Name. That night I dreamed of nothing but fingers clawing through wood. I woke with bruises around my wrist where the hand had gripped me, dark marks blooming like rotten vines beneath my skin. I told myself it wasn't real, that I had imagined the strength of that touch. But when I lifted my sleeve the next morning, I saw the truth. 5 perfect bruises in the shape of a hand that did not belong to any living soul. I swore I would never return to the chapel. And yet, by nightfall I was standing before its doors again, candle trembling in my grasp. The boards groaned as I knelt. My voice shook as I began the prayer, every word tasting like ash on my tongue. The hands answered immediately. They rose like eager parishioners at the call of a hymn, fingers flexing, nails scraping, each one trembling in hunger for the sound of my voice. But this time they didn't just echo me. They spoke. At first it was a chorus of whispers, tangled and wet, impossible to separate. Then one voice cut through the others, dry, deliberate, unmistakable. It said my name, not once, not twice, over and over, in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I froze, my lips stuttered, the prayer faltered, but the hands didn't stop. Their whispers grew louder, until the chapel itself seemed to pulse with it. And then, beneath the chant of my name, another voice bled through. A different name. It was one I had not spoken in years, one I had buried along with the memory of the grave I stood beside when I was a boy. Maria. The moment I heard it, I felt the blood drain from my body. Maria had been my sister, dead for 15 years, and yet the hands beneath the floor whispered her name with the same cadence they used for mine, as if she too was kneeling here in the dark. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The floorboards bulged upward, bending under the weight of something pushing hard from below. Dozens of fingers curled through the cracks, pointing not to the heavens, not even to me, but to the empty space beside me, as if someone unseen had just taken their place there. The candle shuddered and died. In the dark, the whispers became laughter. Episode 4. The Choir Beneath the Wood. I swore I would never speak her name aloud again, but the floor spoke it for me. Maria. The chapel whispered it with every crack in the boards, every sigh in the stone. By the time I lit my candle that night, I was no longer sure if I had come willingly, or if something had led me there. I knelt, trembling, too afraid to begin the prayer, too afraid not to. My lips parted, and the moment the first syllable left me, the floor responded, not with whispers this time, with song. It began low, like the hum of a distant organ vibrating through the wood. Then voices joined, one after another, layering into a terrible harmony. A choir, a congregation trapped below, singing the prayer I had barely started. The sound was wrong. It wasn't the sweet chorus of angels. It was cracked throats, broken voices, singing as though their lungs were filled with dust. Some sang too high, shattering the air. Others too deep, groaning like earth splitting open. But all of them wept between the notes, as if every word was carved from their suffering. I clutched my ears, but the hymn only grew louder, reverberating inside my skull. The candlelight quivered, shadows swaying like dancers around me. And beneath it all, I swore I heard her. Maria. Her voice, fragile, trembling, singing from beneath the floor. I collapsed forward, pressing my cheek to the boards. Tears blurred my sight, but through the cracks, I saw eyes. Not one pair, dozens, staring up at me, red-rimmed, hollow, and wet with grief. The hands followed, clawing up as the choir swelled. Fingers dragged across the wood like bowstrings, keeping the rhythm of the song. One hand rose higher than the rest, curling as if to invite me, no, command me, to finish what they had begun. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to stop, to run, but the hymn pulled at me, wrapped around me like chains. I found myself mouthing the words, the melody threading through my veins, my breath stolen by their dirge. And then silence. All voices ceased at once. The sudden absence of sound was suffocating. In the darkness below, something took a breath. Long, heavy, close, and I understood. The choir was never meant to sing for me. It was meant to summon whatever had just awakened. Episode 5. The First Embrace. The silence after the choir was worse than the song itself. It hung heavy, suffocating, like the air had turned to ash in my lungs. And in that silence, something moved. The floorboards shivered beneath my knees. A pale hand rose higher than the rest, its wrist straining through the crack as though desperate to be born into my world. I should have run. I should have blown out the candle and fled the chapel forever. But I didn't move. The hand reached for me, not the air, not the words. Me. Its fingers clamped around my wrist with a strength no corpse should hold. My breath tore from my throat as I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, cold and damp, pressing into my skin as though it wanted to leave a mark inside me, not just on me. I yanked, twisted, fought, but it only drew me closer to the floor. My candle toppled, its flames spilling shadows across the walls, and in the faint light I saw the hand was not alone. Dozens of others reached upward, not to seize me, but to touch me. Fingers brushed my sleeve, my shoulder, my hair, trembling not with violence but with longing, as though they had waited centuries for someone to kneel above them. But the one that held me was different. It didn't tremble. It didn't beg. It possessed me. I felt its grip burn into my flesh, a bruise forming before my eyes in the exact shape of its fingers. The pain twisted into something else, something almost intimate. My veins throbbed beneath its touch, not with blood but with cold. I screamed. The choir answered. Their song erupted again, louder, shriller, rattling the chapel until dust rained from the rafters. Every hand began to convulse in rhythm with the hymn, their nails gouging at the wood. And yet, the one that held me never moved, never released, as though it had chosen me, and I was no longer allowed to choose anything at all. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the hymn stopped. The hands sank back into the floor, vanishing into the blackness below. All but one. The hand released me at last, slipping back through the boards with a final twitch. I staggered to my feet, gasping, staring at the bruise blooming black on my wrist like a brand. That was no accident. It was a claim. The prayer had not summoned hands to be fed. It had summoned hands to choose, and they had chosen me. Episode 6, The Forgotten Confession. The bruise on my wrist did not fade. It darkened. Every day, the blackness spread, seeping into my veins like ink spilled across parchment. At night, when I lay awake, I swore I could feel fingers still curled around me, pulsing faintly, as though the hand beneath the floor had never truly let go. I needed answers. I returned to the chapel, not to pray this time, but to search. Dust clung to my clothes as I rifled through pews, overturned hymnals, and pried open a rusted chest near the altar. Inside, beneath rotting cloth, I found it, a leather-bound journal, warped with age, its pages brittle and yellow. The first lines were ordinary, filled with scripture and sermons. But further in, the words grew frantic, ink splattered and hurried, like they had been written in fear. I taught them the prayer. I fed the hands. My breath caught as I read on. The author was a priest who once served in this very chapel. He spoke of finding the forbidden psalm, of whispering it to the cracks in the floor. He described the hands rising, at first weak, then stronger, hungrier. They begged for touch, for warmth, for flesh. I gave them what I could. Animals at first, but soon, animals no longer satisfied them. The words smeared into stains as though tears or blood had blurred the ink. My hands trembled as I turned to the final page. The hands choose. Once marked, there is no escape. Their grip does not fade. I prayed to silence them, but the silence only made them starve. And hunger makes them violent. The candle sputtered beside me, its flame bending as if to flee the page. In that moment, I heard it again, the faint tapping beneath the boards. Tap, tap, tap. Not impatient this time. Playful. Mocking. I closed the journal, heart pounding. My wrist throbbed, burning hotter than before. The mark was no longer just a bruise. It was spreading across my palm, a shadow blooming like roots beneath my skin. I understood then. I wasn't reading a warning from the past. I was reading my future, written by another man's trembling hand. Episode 7, The Hands That Begged for Flesh. The journal never left my mind. Its words clung to me like cobwebs, tightening whenever I tried to forget. Animals no longer satisfied them. That line replayed in my head each night until sleep itself became impossible. The bruise on my wrist had spread across my palm, black veins snaking toward my fingertips. It wasn't just a mark anymore. It was a hunger, gnawing at me from within, urging me back to the chapel. And so I went. The pews were warped, the roof sagged with rot, yet the chapel still breathed with a rhythm not its own. I knelt against my will, lips dry, throat tight. I whispered the prayer, hoping silence might finally come. But silence never comes. The moment my voice fell through the cracks, the floor answered. The hands burst forth, not gently, not in trembling worship this time. They clawed, scraped and hammered at the wood as if desperate to rip their way free. Their nails splintered the boards, jagged and long, gouging grooves deep into the floor. Fingers curled and uncurled, scratching like starving dogs at a door. The whispers returned, louder than ever, but the words were no longer prayers. They were pleas. Feed us, touch us, flesh. I stumbled back, but the one marked hand, the hand that had claimed me, rose from the cracks again. Its nails dug into the boards, trembling with furious hunger. When it turned its palm upward, I saw it was not empty. It held scraps, tufts of fur clotted with blood, bones tiny and fragile, a rabbit maybe, or what was left of one. The other hands shrieked, their nails tearing furrows through the wood as they begged for more. The floor shook, dust falling like ash around me. I pressed my marked wrist to my chest, shaking. My heart knew what the journal had meant. The animals were never enough. Soon the hands would demand what only I could give. The candle beside me died in a sudden hiss. In the dark, dozens of fingers brushed the edges of my clothes, my ankles, my knees, not seizing me, not yet, just begging. And for the first time I felt it not as fear, but as temptation. Episode 8. The floor opened like a wound. The chapel no longer felt abandoned. It throbbed, alive, every beam and board straining like muscle around a heart too long starved. I knew I shouldn't have returned, but the mark on my wrist burned like fire, pulling me back as if I were nothing more than a tethered animal. That night I whispered the prayer again, not out of devotion, out of fear, because the silence in my mind was worse than the voices below. The moment my lips formed the first words, the floor convulsed. Not creaked, not groaned. Convulsed, like the belly of something vast and restless. Splinters erupted, nails spat free from the wood, and through the widening cracks, pale fingers clawed for air. But this time, there were too many. Far too many. Hands pressed up in clusters, writhing over one another, each desperate to break through first. They scraped skin against skin, tearing their own flesh as they clawed higher. The boards bent under their weight, bulging upward until the whole chapel floor looked ready to burst. And then it did. With a crack like bones snapping, a jagged seam ripped open down the center aisle. The boards split wide, gaping like a wound that had been waiting to bleed. From within surged a mass of arms, tangled and convulsing, shoving toward me in a wave of pale flesh. The sound was unbearable. Nails screeching against wood, joints popping, voices shrieking in a chorus that no longer begged but demanded. Flesh! I staggered backward, clutching my candle, its flame guttering against the storm of air rushing from below. The stench hit me, rot, damp earth, and something sharp, metallic, blood. One hand shot higher than the rest. It was massive, its wrist thick and sinewed, its nails blackened into claws. It seized the edge of the pew and pulled, dragging the rest of its body upward. But only the arm emerged, endless, writhing, as if the rest of it was too monstrous to fit through the wound. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the choir beneath, their song now a howl of hunger. The floor wasn't just cracking anymore, it was tearing itself apart, opening wider, wider, as though the chapel wanted to birth every lost soul at once. I dropped the candle. Its flame vanished, and in the dark, countless hands brushed my legs, my waist, my throat. They didn't seize me, not yet. They were testing me. They wanted to know how long I could resist before I gave them what they craved. And deep inside, where my terror should have been, I felt something else. A pull, a whisper. What if giving them flesh would make the hunger stop? Episode 9. The dead came to listen. It was no longer just me. The voices beneath the floor had grown too loud, too hungry. Their hymn did not stop at the chapel walls. It bled into the village, threading through windows and doors like smoke. I heard it myself while walking the dirt road home, that faint hum, that desperate chant, rising from the soil beneath my feet. At first the villagers dismissed it. Wind, they said, rats beneath the beams. But soon they heard the words. Old prayers none of them remembered learning, whispered through their dreams until they awoke trembling. Children clutched at their mothers. Swearing hands had brushed their ankles in the night. And still they came. The first to enter the chapel were the brave, or the foolish. Men who thought to prove it was nothing but an echo. Women who believed their faith strong enough to silence blasphemy. They knelt where I had knelt, and they prayed. The floor welcomed them. I watched. God forgive me, I watched, as pale hands rose through the cracks, curling lovingly around their knees, their waists, their throats. The villagers did not scream. Not at first. They seemed entranced. Their eyes rolled back, lips moving in rhythm with the choir below. But then, one by one, their bodies convulsed, and they were gone. No tearing, no blood spilled upon the floorboards. One moment they knelt. The next their bodies vanished, sucked beneath the wood as if the earth itself had devoured them. Only stains remained, dark patches that spread slowly across the planks like veins. The chapel grew crowded. More arrived each night, drawn by the whispers, compelled by the hunger that was not their own. Some came in prayer. Others came in defiance. All were taken. I tried to warn them. I stood in the doorway shouting, begging, but they didn't hear me. Or worse, they didn't care. The song beneath the floor had already claimed their hearts. Now when I kneel, the hands do not only call my name. They speak with dozens of voices, men, women, children, all of them swallowed by the wood. Their words tangle together into a single command, louder each time I return. More, and the bruise on my wrist pulses with their hunger, glowing faintly in the candlelight like a brand. I know what the journal meant now. Once marked, there is no escape. The villagers thought they were kneeling to God, but the floor only answers to the forgotten. Episode 10, the last night of the church. The chapel could not hold them anymore. By the time I returned, the pews were overturned, the altar split in two, and the air stank of rot and smoke, though no fire had burned here. The floorboards pulsed beneath my feet like the belly of a starving beast. Every step I took echoed with a sound that was not wood, but bone. I knew this would be the last night. The hymn began the moment I knelt. Not whispered, not sung. It roared, bursting from the cracks like a storm of voices stacked upon each other. The walls shuddered, dust poured from the rafters, and the crucifix above the altar tilted, as though even Christ himself refused to face what was coming. Then the hands erupted. Not a few, not dozens, hundreds. They surged from the seams, tearing the floor apart plank by plank. Fingers snapped wood like twigs. Palms slapped against stone, nails carved lines into the altar. They did not reach for the air this time. They reached for everything. The pews were dragged down first, wood splintering as invisible weight crushed them through the wound. The altar followed, its marble legs shattering as it sank into the sea of grasping hands. Even the statue of the Virgin was taken, arms stretched skyward as dozens of fingers clutched at her robes and pulled her into the dark. And still, the hymn grew louder. The hands slapped in rhythm, a drumbeat of flesh against wood. My candle guttered, then extinguished. But the chapel did not fall dark. The mark on my wrist glowed now, searing white, pulsing with every chant, every howl, until it felt less like a wound and more like a beacon. They were calling to me. The ground beneath me split, a jagged wound racing from altar to door. I stumbled back as the earth yawned wide, a gaping black mouth lined with fingers, arms, wrists upon wrists. They writhed together like worms in a nest, desperate to drag everything above into their pit. I clutched my marked hand, screaming into the void, "What do you want from me?" The hymn silenced at once, and in that breathless pause, dozens of voices spoke as one. "We want you." The chapel buckled, beams cracked, the roof sagged. I knew the building would not last the night, and when it fell, the hands would no longer be bound to its floor. They would be free. Episode 11, the prayer that must not end. The chapel was dying around me. Every beam groaned, every nail shrieked as the hands dragged stone and wood into their endless hunger. I should have run, but my legs betrayed me. The mark on my wrist pulsed hotter than fire, dragging me to my knees as though the floor itself commanded me. And then I understood. The journal had whispered the truth, but not all of it. The hands were bound by prayer. It was not worship that fed them, it was restraint. The psalm wasn't a key to open them. It was a chain to hold them down. The moment I stopped, they grew ravenous. The silence starved them. If I ended the prayer, the floor would open wider and nothing, no altar, no village, no earth, would be enough to stop them from pouring out. So I began again. My voice broke, raw and trembling, but the words spilled anyway. Latin syllables, jagged in my throat, tumbling into the cracks. At once the hands froze. The hymn stilled. The chapel held its breath. And as long as I spoke, they listened, not calm, not silent, waiting, each pale finger twitching in rhythm with my words, each nail hovering just shy of tearing into me. They leaned into the prayer like children clutching a lullaby, hungry but restrained. My lungs burned, my lips cracked, my throat begged for rest, but the mark on my wrist pulsed harder, warning me of what silence would bring. I tried to stop, just for a moment, and the floor screamed. Dozens of hands burst higher, clawing at the air, snapping splinters into my skin. Their voices shrieked in unison. "No silence! No silence! No silence!" I gasped, choking out the words again, and instantly they froze, retreating just enough to let me breathe. My heart pounded in terror and realization. This was the curse, not to pray once, but to pray forever. The psalm was endless, a circle that looped upon itself, no final line to close. Whoever was chosen, whoever was marked, was bound to keep feeding the chant, again and again, without pause, without end. My lips trembled, bleeding from the strain. My knees bled against the wood. "Still," I whispered. "Still," I prayed, because I knew the truth now. If I stopped, even for a breath, the hands would rise, not just for me, but for the world above. And I did not know how long my voice would last. Episode 12. The hands chose a new voice. My lips were torn, my throat was fire, my chest heaved like a dying bellows. Yet still, I prayed. Word after word, syllable after syllable, circling endlessly through the psalm that had no end. Every time I faltered, the hands surged, nails clawing higher, voices shrieking for flesh. Every time I forced the chant back into the air, they froze, trembling, waiting, like beasts at the edge of a leash, only I held them back. But no voice lasts forever. The chapel groaned around me. Half the roof had collapsed, moonlight pouring through the broken beams. My knees bled into the floor, crimson seeping between the cracks. The hands below twitched greedily at the taste, quivering with delight. I tried to pray louder, to drown their hunger, but my voice cracked, then broke. The last syllable left my mouth as a whisper, too faint to hold them. The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was thunder. The floor split wide with a roar that shook the earth. A wave of pale arms erupted upward, seizing pews, crucifix, and stone alike, dragging it all into the abyss. Dust filled the air as the choir beneath screamed their victory, their hunger unleashed at last. One hand found me, the same hand that had marked me from the beginning. Its grip clamped around my throat, lifting me from the ground as easily as a child plucks a doll. Its nails pierced my skin, and yet there was no pain, only inevitability. Dozens more wrapped around my limbs, my waist, my chest. Not tearing, not killing, claiming. The hymn returned. Deafening now, sung not in hunger but in triumph. And then the truth revealed itself. They did not need my prayer anymore. They had taken my voice. My lips moved without my will. Words poured from me, louder, stronger, a chant fed not by lungs but by the chorus that had swallowed me whole. I was no longer the one restraining them. I was their instrument. As they dragged me beneath the boards, the last thing I saw was the doorway of the chapel, open, glowing with moonlight. A figure stood there, frozen in terror, another villager drawn by the hymn. The hands shivered in delight. A new voice, a new mark. The prayer would never end. Episode 13, The Doorway. I only wanted to see what the others whispered about. The chapel had been abandoned for years, yet tonight its windows glowed faintly, as though candles still burned within. I told myself it was nonsense. Village superstition. The kind of story children tell to frighten each other. But when the hymn reached my ears, low, rising, irresistible, I followed it here. The door groaned open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and ash. The pews were gone, the altar shattered. The floor looked split, scarred by something deeper than time. And there, at the center, a single figure knelt. He faced away from me. His shoulders shook as though in prayer, his voice echoing in a tongue I did not understand. The words were sharp, jagged, yet beautiful in a terrible way. They pulled at me, tugging at the marrow of my bones, urging me to join him. "Hello?" I whispered. He stopped. Slowly, too slowly, his head turned. The candlelight, or whatever light remained, revealed a face pale as bone, eyes black with veins spreading from their corners. His lips moved, but the sound that poured forth was not his own. It was dozens of voices, layered, echoing, overlapping. A chorus rising from a throat that could not possibly contain them. And then I saw his wrist. A mark, dark and spreading, pulsed in rhythm with the hymn. He lifted his hand toward me. trembling, inviting. Behind him, the floor shuddered. Cracks widened. Pale fingers groped upward, curling toward the air. I froze, my breath caught, and then I heard it. Whispers, not from him, not from the ground, but from within me. Pray. The words slithered across my tongue before I even realized my lips had parted, and the hands below stirred,